Questions about the mission. All of it as the president prepares to rally. Protests planned in Phoenix. Will he come out swinging after a widely condemned response to Charlottesville? Grim discovery found in the wreckage of a Navy destroyer. A growing investigation in the Pacific. Chicken health warning. A spike in people getting sick as more and more families invest in a backyard trend. Preventing a sudden killer, the leading cause of death for people over age 40. For the first time, doctors say they may be able to predict who's at risk and stop it before it strikes. And to serve and protect, how a policeman doing double duty as the ice cream man is inspiring America. Nightly News begins right now.
NBC News World Headquarters in New York. This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. After enduring one of the roughest patches of his presidency last week over the violence in Charlottesville, President Trump is off to a busy start this week, rallying supporters at an event in Arizona this evening on the heels of last night's primetime speech in which he announced an open-ended American commitment to prosecuting the war in Afghanistan. A commitment leaving a lot of unanswered questions. Meantime, tensions are high in Phoenix right now, where protesters are also massing for tonight's presidential rally. We have it all covered, starting with NBC's Kristen Welker. Kristen, good evening.
Lester, good evening to you. This is President Trump's 8th campaign-style rally since taking office, and it comes as he's been openly feuding with the state's 2 Republican senators. Neither of them are expected to attend, but thousands of his supporters are, and there could be fireworks. President Trump putting a focus on his signature issue, immigration control, in Yuma, Arizona today. Just hours before holding a campaign-style rally in Phoenix, where protesters are already lining the streets, many fuming amid buzz the president was considering pardoning hardline immigration activist, former Sheriff Joe Arpaio. No action is expected tonight, but tensions are high.
This kind of things will not be tolerated in the state of Arizona.
Almost everyone is bracing for the president to go off script, a sharp contrast from his teleprompter address last night, unveiling his new strategy in Afghanistan.
We are not nation building again. We are killing terrorists.
The decision to ramp up, a shift away from his campaign vow to keep Americans out of foreign wars.
My original instinct was to pull out.
Establishment Republicans largely supportive, while Democrats called for more specifics. But the sharpest criticism is from the far right.
It was a clear flip-flop, and the president spent a lot of time explaining the flip-flop.
In Indiana, the reality of America's longest war the president now owns on display. Hundreds turned out as the body of Army Sergeant Jonathan Michael Hunter returned home. Also tonight, mounting pressure after the president's response to Charlottesville.
A wound inflicted upon a single member of our community is a wound inflicted upon us all.
Matt Lauer pressing the vice president on today.
But he said there were fine people on both sides of that rally.
The president specifically denounced white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and the KKK repeatedly.
At home and abroad, the president grappling with the path forward. Kristen Welker, NBC News, Phoenix.
I'm Andrea Mitchell. President Trump promising victory in Afghanistan.
Our troops will fight to win.
But tonight, major questions about the mission and how he intends to accomplish it. Like how many troops will it take? There are 8,400 there now. Secretary Mattis today.
I'd rather not say a number and then have to change it later on.
Defense officials say it will be close to 4,000. Needed now because in just the last 2 years, the Afghan military has failed to stop the Taliban, which now controls or is challenging the Afghan government in 40% of the country. The president now lifting restrictions on the U.S. military, allowing more counter-terror operations to try and take that territory back. So how will the president deal with Pakistan, the source of much of the terror?
We can no longer be silent about Pakistan's safe havens for terrorist organizations.
Those who've faced this dilemma before say it's easier said than done.
You can ask, you can say pretty please, but I don't think the Pakistanis are necessarily going to respond. So I think the only key to that is to be able to develop an approach that in fact seals that border.
And what about diplomatic vacancies? No ambassadors in Afghanistan or India and key State Department posts.
Do you have enough people, given the fact that there are not Trump-confirmed diplomatic appointees in many of these positions?
I'm not at all concerned about the competency level or the experience of the people that we have working on this.
And the Secretary of State on another flashpoint, North Korea offering an olive branch to Kim Jong-un, noting that there have been no missile tests fired since the UN sanctions, and saying that there could be talks if that continues. Lester?
Andrew Mitchell at the State Department, thank you. Turning to another major story we're following, remains have been found in the search for 10 American sailors missing after the USS John McCain collided with an oil tanker. And tonight, officials are beginning to discuss what may have caused that crash. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer has more tonight from Singapore.
Tonight, the intensifying search is focused on this damaged section of the USS McCain, where divers found remains of some of the missing American sailors, both inside the ship and at sea. And we're learning who some of the missing sailors are, like 23-year-old Petty Officer Logan Palmer, his family in Illinois praying he might survive.
Everywhere I look, I see the opportunity that I'll see my brother again. I'm sure that goes for my family as well.
What caused the devastating crash between the destroyer and that oil tanker? Navy officials today say they're looking at everything, even sabotage.
I've heard of these reports of cyber attacks. We've seen no indications of that as of yet, but we are not taking any consideration off the table.
Other possible factors they'll investigate: crew exhaustion, negligence, and heavy traffic on a risky route, often called a superhighway at sea.
The crash happened just east of here in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. It's narrow and tricky to navigate, especially with massive traffic like this.
Typically, 2 officers and 6 sailors would be on the bridge while going through these waters.
The most important detail will be the readiness and training of the crew. At the end of the day, the safety of any Navy ship depends on the crew.
The Navy today starting its temporary halt to operations worldwide after a second deadly mishap in just 2 months. Janice Mackey-Frayer, NBC News, Singapore.
Heavy rain and high water rescues today as roads suddenly turned to rivers in parts of Kansas and Missouri. People were pulled from their cars and water was so high some people even had to be plucked from rooftops as water rushed into their homes. The rain has now stopped and conditions should help the region dry out over the next few days. Tonight, federal health officials are warning about a spike in cases of salmonella, making people sick, and they say what's to blame is a growing trend in backyards all across the country, maybe yours. NBC's Katie Beck has the alert for families.
And then the whole structure is kind of the chicken coop.
Just outside Atlanta, Anne Marie Anderson, like so many Americans, is raising her own chickens for the fresh eggs and the fun of it.
I think they've become very mainstream.
But the Center for Disease Control now warning those backyard coops have caused a nationwide salmonella outbreak, with numbers still spiking.
We're following 10 different outbreaks right now. Each of them is caused by a different strain of salmonella.
The CDC reports that 961 people have tested positive for salmonella this year. That's more cases than in all of 2016. It's been found in 48 states, causing 215 hospitalizations and 1 death.
We think these cases are going up because more and more people have backyard poultry.
And the salmonella risk highest when they're baby chicks. Anderson takes every precaution.
We have specific chicken shoes for being around the coop.
Young children are most vulnerable to infection. Nearly 30% of cases this year have been children under 5. The CDC says always wash or sanitize your hands after contact. Don't snuggle or kiss the birds. Don't let any birds indoors, and clean all equipment outside.
This is a problem that many people can help address.
Following good hygiene so a hobby doesn't become a health risk. Katie Beck, NBC News, Atlanta.
There's important health news about the leading cause of death among adults over 40, sudden cardiac arrest. It's a short circuit in the heart that strikes more than 350,000 people each year, often without warning. It's been a mystery to doctors, but now new research is helping to predict who is at risk. Our medical correspondent, Dr. John Torres, has details.
Just 43 years old, Lynn Howard never imagined her heart would suddenly stop beating.
I had no health problems before this. I was completely healthy.
But the mother of three suffered a sudden cardiac arrest, a condition so deadly more than 90% don't survive.
The goal is to nip sudden cardiac arrest in the bud, because by the time it happens, it's too late.
It's not a heart attack, which is caused by a blockage. Sudden cardiac arrest is caused by a short circuit in the heart. And there hasn't been a good test to determine who's vulnerable.
We don't have any real predictors of risk.
After Dr. Sumit Chugh studied 1 million people, he found a possible solution. Using an EKG, an inexpensive test that's been around for 100 years.
We're looking at 6 data points on this EKG, ranging from the heartbeat to electrical activity recorded from the heart.
Dr. Chugh discovered that data is the key to predicting who's at risk for cardiac arrest. The goal now to get that risk score included on every EKG and implant high-risk patients with a defibrillator that shocks the heart back to normal.
Can it be life-saving? Absolutely.
Lynn Howard now has a defibrillator and hopes more people can benefit from knowing their risk.
Anything to prevent this from happening to at least one person would be great.
Researchers are now conducting a bigger study with the ultimate goal, Lester, that every time someone gets an EKG, they walk away knowing their risk of sudden cardiac arrest and can do what is needed to prevent it.
All right, John, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Now to an NBC News investigation. For decades, the U.S. and its allies have tried to thwart North Korea's nuclear ambitions with sanctions. New sanctions announced just today. But over the years, those efforts have fallen short, experts say, and North Korea has been able to advance its nuclear program at a stunning pace. So why haven't sanctions worked? Part of the reason is a secret network that stretches all the way to the U.S. Here's NBC News senior investigative correspondent Cynthia McFadden.
It is not a surprise that the man who bought this $1 million house in the leafy New York suburb of Great Neck was looking for a piece of the American dream. What may surprise you is that the homeowner is a Chinese businessman named Son Sidong, who is linked to the illicit weapons trade with North Korea. So secretive, there is no known picture of him. He's tied to this shipment of 132 tons of North Korean RPGs hidden under a load of iron ore. Possible destination, Syria. Export records also show Mr. Sun sent dozens of shipments of technology to North Korea that could well be used for its nuclear and missile programs. How is someone like that buying a house in the U.S.?
To have somebody who's involved in trade with North Korea investing in real estate in the United States without many checks or any enforcement or prevention suggests there are major holes in the system.
North Korea has been evading sanctions for years. 90% of its trade is through China, much of it centered here in the border city of Dangdong. North Korea is just across that bridge. Companies here give Kim Jong-un's isolated regime access to the global financial system.
You need Chinese cooperation to make any sanctions or other coercive power work against the North Koreans.
And just today, the U.S. imposed sanctions against 5 Chinese companies, including this trading company in Dangdong, accused of having passed hundreds of millions of dollars illegally through these U.S. banks. Experts who track Chinese companies that help North Korea say this kind of crackdown is critical.
We can touch them. There are very few pressure points, and we can make a major impact.
As for that house in Great Neck, it's on the market. Mr. Soon, who has not been charged with a crime and did not respond to our request for comment, apparently decided the American dream was not for him. Cynthia McFadden, NBC News, New York.
Still ahead here tonight, a bizarre mystery at sea. An inventor rescued when his private submarine sinks. But where is the woman who was also on board? It's a twisted tale he's telling, and we'll have it for you. Also thinking of traveling soon? Why now is the time to book that plane ticket. Hope you can stay with us.
With
my moderate to severe Crohn's disease, I kept looking for ways to manage my symptoms. I thought I was doing okay.